you put me out at 14910? Be making contact with the other half here.
In the suspicious person, 4423 Live will get the mobile station, group of guys in an old Cutlass. 10.
You couldn't be gay. It was the worst thing that you could be.
Our field investigation has determined that you are a homosexual. How do you respond to this charge?
We were interrogated like prisoners of war. You know, we were thrown in the back of a car, driven to an undisclosed area, interrogated for hours and hours.
My war was within the military, the Canadian Armed Forces.
And I remember telling them in one of the interviews, I said, you can't do this. I said, this is Canada. And he looked me in the eye and he said, we're the military, we can do what we want.
Prior to World War II, there was no security screening in the Federal Civil Service. And even during World War II and shortly after World War II, there was no security screening. And then the Guzenko defection happened.
In your opinion, sir, and in your experience, is sex and such things part of the spying game?
Yes, definitely.
You know, on September 5th, 1945, Igor Guzenko walked out of the Soviet embassy. He was a lowly cipher clerk, and stuffed under his shirt were 108 documents that found its way to the RCMP. It revealed that the civil service had been widely penetrated by it was then called the NKVD, later the KGB. And that started the whole process of looking at the backgrounds of the people who were working for the government. And after that, the civil service was never the same again.
Canada was very naive, and we thought that, you know, who would bother spying on Canada? You know, who would care? And then we find out that there's a communist spy ring being run out of the House of Commons by Fred Rose, who is the communist MP. And I think it really freaked people out.
The government responded and started to clamp down. And so security screening was introduced in 1948. And that opened the door to just snooping and prying. And the authorities in the West figured, okay, the KGB is going to start looking for people with secrets to hide.
It's like someone, you know, is cheating on their partner, someone is gambling. I mean, there's a whole bunch of possible ways in which someone could have a character weakness, right? Or some sort of addiction. But the one that the Canadian state focuses on is homosexuality.
It was the key focus, not just a focus, it was the focus, you see. The Mounties were like extremely right-wing, very conservative, and they just had a visceral detestation of homosexuality, and they saw it as a moral failing.
So I think you saw in the late 1940s this kind of social panic about there are communists everywhere, there are homosexuals everywhere. And that feeds into Senator McCarthy's very high-profile witch hunt against communists and against homosexuals, who were seen as virtually synonymous. And we become viewed as a security threat for the first time, but also as a threat to society because you never know who's a homosexual.
Ralph showed him some pornographic pictures. Jimmy knew he shouldn't be interested, but, well, he was curious. What Jimmy didn't know was that Ralph was sick, a sickness that was not visible like smallpox, but no less dangerous and contagious, a sickness of the mind. You see, Ralph was a homosexual, a person who demands an intimate relationship with members of their own sex.
When the purge really took off in 1958, John Diefenbaker, of all people forget, you know, he had the Bill of Rights. He was a criminal defense lawyer. He actually believed in human rights. He expressed concern about this, that maybe this was going too far, and he had some people look into it. But if you see the history of it from that point forward, it's like the RCMP is a force unto itself. Certainly politicians were aware of it from time to time, but I don't think they really controlled it. I think they were told, oh, this is top secret, it's very important, this is the way we do things.
What happened then, they said, well, we've got to find out who's gay.
They came up with all kinds of indicators.
If you wore a pinky ring, that was a fairly good indication. If you drove a white convertible, big indication.
If you go for a beer, you sit on the left. Always go to the left, never go to the right. Like the way you sit or the way you hold your cigarette, you know, you don't want to appear gay or homosexual, so you got to look butch.
My old sergeant, she was told when she first got in the military not to go play sports with the other girls because she would be tagged as a lesbian. Apparently, us lesbians are very sporty, I don't know.
And the other one was I couldn't understand this till I thought about it. Don't breast your books. Is when you carry a binder, don't hold it up like over your breast. Carry it at your side like man.
But in those days, we had to be careful. You know, you didn't want to appear fifi.
There was the official policy, and then there was the de facto policy. The de facto policy was that if you were homosexual, you were out. It was just, that's what it came down to. You were out. There was no discretion, and the Mounties got really carried away with this.
And at that time, I was arrested by the RCMP. And the RCMP picked me up, and they said that they wanted to interrogate me. And of course, because I was brave, I wasn't afraid of the devil. My family knew I was gay. My boss knew I was gay. I was a well-known hairdresser, and I was a drag queen. That I feared the RCMP, not unless they pull my nails off. And they got me there, and I said, is this what you want to see? And I put down my drag pictures, and they said, yes. They said, we have a file on you, and you're the most notorious gay person in Ottawa. And they had about 100 albums of gay, presumably male, in these albums, and they wanted me to put a name to them. They were under the impression that gay males would be blackmailed by the Russian, and I told the RCMP that I wasn't going to give up names, and they said, well, you're a traitor to our country. Well, I said, I'd rather be a traitor to our country than a traitor to my friends, and I never divulged a single name. And when I finished, I said, fuck you very much.
The RCMP would walk into a workplace and say, you follow me. And then say, if you don't resign, we're outing you. And then firing you. So we don't know how many people then it would have appeared in the records as resignation as opposed to dismissal. So that would give you another whole cohort of people who were forced out of their job, blackmailed out of their job by the police.
So I was at work one day, and I got a phone call from the commissioner downstairs in the lobby saying, your presence is required down here. 2 members of the RCMP in full uniform were downstairs. So I had a bad feeling. Of course, I knew something was up. So I went down.
My supervisor told me, you have an appointment next week, Thursday at 11 or something like that. Mr. So-and-so from the SIU would like to meet with you. And I asked, could you tell me what it's about? And no, she couldn't, because she was never told what it's about. And you're never again to probe and to ask. You're just to obey and to follow the rules.
And they said, you have many friends, and if you can identify some of these friends that like the homosexuals. And I said, well, why are you doing this? They said, well, we want to make sure that you don't get blackmailed. And I said, blackmailed? Why would I be blackmailed? I'm only a clerk.
And then he led me to this little room that he opened up with a key. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was little more than a storage space for a janitor or something. But it was just slightly big enough to have a little table and a light above the table, which just hung, like a bare bulb. And I had to stop myself almost from laughing out loud when I saw it. I couldn't believe you were actually going to sit in this little windowless, airless room.
Then they said, we just want you to look at some photographs, okay? And I saw myself with a group of my friends standing in front of a car. And I think they did this on purpose because I couldn't very well say, well, I don't know them. I'm there.
And he began right off the bat, without anything that led up to it. It was just a clear-cut statement. Our field investigation has determined that you are a homosexual. How do you respond to this charge? But I was very surprised at the level of detail that he wanted to know certain things. He wanted to know about my personal life. He wanted to know who my friends were. He wanted to know names of people, especially in the government, and in particular in D&D. He wanted to know specifics about my sex life.
After I left there, I was kind of shaking. I said to myself, why me?
It struck me since then that I've thought about it, that, security requires that you be trustworthy. But trustworthy is a product of dignity. And here is something that robs you of your dignity. So even if a person wasn't going to be militant in any way, here was some way to make you feel that you were not dignified. You weren't a human being. You weren't a full human being. So that's always stayed with me. And it's still hard. But I'm okay.
So it seems like this purge just developed a life of its own, and it became a cottage industry for the RCMP. My understanding is they had a whole floor at RCMP headquarters devoted to this special investigation unit that was doing security checks and investigating civil service people and so on. And I understand that perhaps as much as 90% of their work was looking for LGBT people. So a lot of people's jobs and careers depended on this purge continuing. And if it stopped, oh my God, all these people are going to be out of work.
They had this one program where they would look for places where homosexuals would assemble, around the city of Ottawa. And they came up with this map. And they put dots. They figured, this is the area where homosexuals go to. They put a red dot on there, and then they find another area, another red dots. And pretty soon the map was all red. And they had to get a bigger map. So they got a bigger map. And it was all red too.
What often would happen in the basement tavern of the Lord Elgin on Elgin Street. The basement tavern by that point in time was actually a major place where men went to meet other men. public servants and non-public servants would be using that space. What became apparent to some of the gay men hanging out there was that every once in a while they would find someone come into the bar, put a newspaper up in front of them, which was certainly, first of all, really odd, right? This person wasn't establishing eye contact. They didn't seem to want to be there for the same reasons that other people were there. People would also then realize that there were holes cut in this newspaper and that this person was actually taking photographs of every person in the bar.
I had a friend that worked for the parole board, and he was like an animal that was afraid to be in public. He said, oh, we can't go to the Honeydew, I might be photographed. Can't go here, I might be seen. And all the gay people that had important government position were petrified to socialize. They just socialized at house parties.
They were trying to look for more efficient ways of doing it, which is eventually what brought them to the fruit machine.
This is the attempt by the government to determine and find a technology or a set of tests that would scientifically and objectively be able to determine who was gay or lesbian, and if you were identified as being gay or lesbian, you would be either refused employment or purged from your job, right? So from the 62, actually, until 67, 68, the Canadian government, with the mandate of the Security Panel and Cabinet, is actually involved in trying to develop this technology. Dr. Wake was in the psychology department at Carleton University and was a major researcher who was brought in to work on the fruit machine research. First of all, he was sent to the States for, I think, most of a year to study the detection technology that existed there. And then he came back and produced a special project report, which they decided, we'll go with this and we're gonna fund it and pay for it.
The plan was to show basically dirty pictures of males in either nude or semi-nude to other males to see if this broadened their pupils.
It means a whole series of tests were part of the special project, including anxiety tests, sweat tests, word association tests, masculinity, femininity scales. But the core of it was a pupillary response test.
And this testing went on for years, like 3 or 4 years.
But of course, it never really worked. They were never able to get the numbers of research subjects they wanted, even such things as like the different distances between people's pupils in their eyes messed up the technology.
It strikes me as utterly ridiculous too. I mean, and so non-scientific that you'd wonder why they'd want to trust the results of such a test. And yet they seemed eager to.
It got to have a reputation, the fruit machine. And the guy who coined the term fruit machine was a sergeant in the RCMP named Vaughan Mackenzie. And he had a very wry sense of, sort of a quirky sense of humor. And he called it the fruit machine, and the name stuck. And it became the informal name that was used. And now the name has lasted decades later. That's how we know the name, because of Vaughan Mackenzie calling it the fruit machine at the time.
I mean, the fruit machine to me is kind of a metaphor for that era. It's the Cold War era, but also for the, what can you call it, kind of the pre-liberation gay world.
Take this thing on homosexuality. I think the view we take here is that there's no place for the state in the bedrooms of the nation, and I think that what's done in private between adults doesn't concern the criminal code.
I believe that the purge actually increased after 1969 because I think the people running those government departments and the RCMP realized that their days were numbered, that it was no longer legitimate to get rid of LGBT people, and they had to hurry up and get rid of them as quick as possible.
At that point, there was a push to have women in the military. You know, the early 70s, when feminism was just starting to have a little bit of pressure in the world. And
been wanting to be in the military since a child. I just grew up with this, I want to be a peacekeeper. I want to be like my uncle in the Second World War. I want to be like my uncle in the Korean War. I just want to help my country, defend my country, be there for my country. That was my goal.
First of all, they want to train you to become a warrior, to become a soldier in case of war. I felt like I belonged, and it was pretty, I enjoyed it a lot. I cannot say that it was a piece of cake or easy.
Get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, clean up yourselves, clean up the barracks.
You know, the crease in your pants have to almost cut your fingers. You know, the shine in your boots your teeth have to reflect in your boots. Then you know they're done. If you can see your teeth in your boots, they're done. They're perfect.
We had physical training, we had gun training, we had physical training.
I handled the rifle, the submachine gun, and the 9mm Browning, no problem.
It was fun. It was all that a girl could dream of. Well, a girl who wanted to become a soldier, of course.
I had a ball. Basic training for me was a party. The back of my Maverick, if that car could talk.
When I joined, I was 18. So I was just discovering myself, just having fun and having a lot of friends. So that was awesome. And people, I mean, the women that I shared my platoon with, like, they were all sisters.
I was just happy to be part of something big, I think. To be accepted, to be me, and just loved for just doing something good.
When I went to Borden, there was 4 to a room with a little closet in the corner. So you had 4 women in the same room. So if you're already starting your, thinking that you might be attracted, you're throwing into an ideal situation for women. To me, it was the best time for being a woman in the military and exploring their sexuality, and the worst time.
I was quite green, I'd say. I did not have interest in boys. That I knew.
For me, I discovered that I liked women. I think at that age, you're still exploring and still trying to figure out your life. And I was writing, I'll always remember the time I was in Borden. I was writing letters to a young woman that I fell in love with.
When the heart speaks, what can you do? And it was at once fantastic, but also almost terrifying, because I also knew that that was not conducive to a military career. And there were policies. I wasn't quite sure what the details were, but I knew it was something to be hidden.
In the public service, it wasn't quite as bad most of the time, aside from those very, very early years. But the stuff that happened to the military was in some ways sometimes more intense. Because, like, you have to remember that this not only includes purging individuals, but a climate of violence.
We knew there was investigations on the base. We were hiding, in a sense, when you go and see a friend, a gay friend, you park 3 or 4 blocks from the place and you walk and you make sure nobody sees you. You don't want them to see where you go.
I know we hid it a lot. If they find out that you're gay, then they're gonna kick you out. So the seeds of fearfulness is planted.
Just by rumor, you could be taken into the Special Investigation Unit and be interrogated.
They were going after their own. It was internal. My war was within the military, the Canadian Armed Forces.
So you have this military campaign already pre-existing that purges sex deviates. And now you have, combined with that in the military, these national security practices.
The CFAO is a Canadian Forces Administrative Orders. That's compiled in about 20 books. It's huge. Then the Article 1920 showed up.
They called it homosexualism, sexual abnormality investigation, medical examination, and disposal. Disposal really marked me a long time, okay? Because I was disposed of, you know. And in this law, they were putting that for the purpose of disorder, homosexual is one who has sexual propensity for person of his own sex. Sexual abnormality is form of sexual behavior and non-conforming with accepting moral standard or constituting an offense under the Criminal Code of Canada, voyeurism, exhibitionism, gross indecency, and bestiality. So we're comparing here homosexual with people that will have sex with animals.
So I'm sitting in the classroom having, again, a lecture of some kind. And then somebody knocks at the door and they said, Lapel, grab your stuff.
He opened the door. There were two guys standing there.
And they said, follow us. So I followed them outside.
And they blindfolded me.
Get inside the car. They got in front and they started driving. And in the first 5 minutes, I said, excuse me, why I'm here, you know? And he said, shut up. So I shut up.
They brought me to a shack that I still today don't know where it was.
They brought me to a place that I never knew existed.
Picture the straight back chair with a bare table and two other chairs with two men interrogating you about your sex life. So it wasn't just, are you lesbian? And you admit it, yes, I am. It was like, okay, who, what, where, when, and how you did everything.
Started off asking very general questions, and I came right out and said, are you trying to ask if I'm a lesbian?
And I'm afraid. I'm 19 years old, and I'm being asked questions about who takes the garbage out in the relationship.
What do you do when you meet up with your friends? Do you hug? Do you kiss?
Do you like being kissed by a woman? Do you like being touched by a woman? Seeing a woman's breast, what does that mean to you?
Do you masturbate in the mirror? Do you use a dildo? I'm 19 years old. I'm discovering who I am, and I'm saying, what the hell is a dildo?
The questioning said, well, we heard that, whatever, you know, that you're a lesbian and, you know, you're not allowed to be in the forces. And so that was done. I said, no, denied it.
And then they start screaming. Okay, you're suspected of being a lesbian. We want names of all your friends, and we want them now, and you're not gonna get out of here until you talk. So you go, no, I'm not a lesbian. I tried it during English school, but I'm not a lesbian.
At one point, they say, if you're honest with us, we'll keep you. So, okay. Well, I'm confused. That was my honest thing is I had a girlfriend, I met a boy, I was with him, and then I met that woman, and it was just a first-time thing, and I'm 20 years old, and I'm not sure of my sexual orientation. Then
at one point, they leave you alone. They both leave the room. You're there, no water, pas de fumée, no smoking, and your brain just says, what's my crime here?
If I would have talked, the interview, the sequestration would have been over within an hour or two. No. I decided I was not going to talk, and it lasted for 3 days.
they just held you in custody for hours and just asked you these repeated questions, circular questions over and over and over again. I think what they were trying to get at was, who else?
Michelle, it's not going to be a pleasant thing, I know for you, okay? There's always been a concern with people in the forces. How many people do you know?
Why are you concerned about how many people? You know, I'm dedicated, I work hard at my job. I don't get it.
It was so humiliating to be so dedicated and yet so discriminated against.
And finally, the last question he asked was, how do you make love to a woman? And I got pissed and I told him, bring me your wife and I'll show you. And that was the end of the interview.
And I mean, they would read people's mails. They would tap phones. They would do everything that you can imagine a spy unit would do, just to entrap someone who was gay or lesbian.
You'd have to understand the types of questions, the insistency, the repetition of it. They psychologically were breaking these people down. They would repeatedly ask questions, like the same questions, the degrading questions, over and over and over again. And it wouldn't be just for one day, it would be for multiple days, continuously. And if you put yourself in any foot of an 18, 20-year-old, 25-year-old person, if you just imagine pulling one off the street today and sticking them into a small room, I think, and doing that to them, I think we would call it torture today.
And I remember telling them in one of the interviews, I said, you can't do this. I said, this is Canada. And he looked me in the eye and he said, we're the military. We can do what we want.
I think what people need to remember is how young these people were. They were 18, 19, 20 years old. They were very young people. They were a long way from home.
I was not really strong. So I was very intimidated. So I was not the one saying, hey, how did you find out? Or do you have proof or anything like that? I didn't know how to defend myself. I didn't have a lawyer to defend me beside me. They did everything against the law when you think about it, because you're supposed to have someone that helps you, you know, with your rights.
And when you feel they know, I remember I looked at the wall and I said, I'm giving up. I'm telling them I am gay. Yes, and I remember saying, P, whatever. I'll take the consequences. But then, right then, I thought the consequences will be nothing. I'm a good soldier. I do everything the way I'm supposed to. Nothing will happen. You don't know the future. So I gave up. I told them the truth. And when you tell them the truth, you can't untruth.
They started asking me about other young women that I knew that were lesbian.
The main thing they wanted names of other people. And when they asked if I knew, I said yes. And they got out a piece of paper and a pen. And I said, you've got me. You're not getting anyone else. Like, I didn't want to take other people down. I did not want to be the cause. I didn't want to be the one. The reason I didn't want to lead them to anyone else.
CFAO 1920 gave them all the right to do anything to detect us and kick us out.
They know everything. Who you're with, what you said, where you went, every single second of your life, they know.
We were all being purged. They were looking at us. It was chase the queers.
They told me that I was a lesbian and that it was no place in the military for people like me.
So they followed me in Toronto. They told me the hotel name, my room number, who I was with. So I know I was done. I know I was done.
It was like a movie. It was like a movie. But in the movies, they take actors. They don't use teenagers. I was a teenager. I was a kid.
And at that moment, I cracked. I cried. I was shaking like this. Couldn't believe my life was over. I cried so much that the medic said, we cannot release her today. She's in shock. So she said, well, we'll take care of her and we'll let you know when she can be released. So I trusted her, so I followed her. Figured that they were gonna take me in the hospital for a day or two, the time that I come down, and but we ended up in Saint Joseph Hospital in psychiatry.
He said you'll have to go see the psychologist on a regular basis, and then we'll determine from there. So they kept sending me there once a month.
The next thing they did was ask me if I was willing to take rehabilitation. And I thought, is that going to be shock treatment? And he goes, we're not here to discuss treatment. Are you willing to take rehabilitation? I said, well, I'm not sick.
All I remember is getting a shot. And after that, it's blurred for 2.5 months.
I had 2 stays on the psych ward. The first time, maybe 30-some days, and after that, 85 days or 84 days. So five electroshock treatments were given to me. And another 5 of them have been documented on the medical file. They omitted the 5 others.
So I stayed in psychiatry, and days went by and days went by. And one day in March, my partner showed up, and he says, Lucy, they want to release you today. So I'm here to get you. I said, just get me out of here. So I had to put my uniform back because I got in there in uniform. So I put my uniform back, signed all the paper, and walked out.
I still have the letter saying he diagnosed homosexuality and that I could not be cured of it. Therefore, I could not be rehabilitated.
1989, I was released honorably by the military as being, I really have to get this correct because it's so outrageous, not advantageously employable due to homosexuality.
The release orderly room was busy, so they asked me to type up my own release docs.
While I was being investigated, I was up for promotion. And I was called into my sergeant's office. And the sergeant had all the promotions piled up there, mine on top. He says, you're being promoted. Congratulations. But picked up the promotion and ripped it up in my face and said, you won't be needing this where you're going.
I felt like shit, being paraded like this from office to office to do my clearing out. So once it was done, I had to stop at the MP station to give back my badge. And that was the worst thing. I was crying so much. And I have to give to a warrant officer my badge. So I give it to him and walked out, and the gate opened, and I was a civilian.
This for me, that moment in my life, there was a lot of event. That was the event that I have the most difficulty remember all, because I was so triggered. I was so like the floor open under your feet, that I feel like something, I lost it. Like in my head and my self-esteem, everything, like crash.
I knew that there were rapes that went on, there were sexual assaults that went on. And the military kind of turned a blind eye to it because they were so busy chasing queers and letting the boys be boys. And that was acceptable.
I went to the mess hall to meet some friends for having a drink to say, you know, you're going to be leaving, you know. And some young corporal put a drug in my glass and drugged me. And I left with him. And they tried to stop me, but I can't remember because I was drugged. And he raped me. And I woke up in his apartment the next day and couldn't figure out why I was there. And he told me why I was there and why he had raped me to show me what it would be to be with a man. And I'm saying, like, okay. I ran out of there and I'm walking home and I'm saying to be with a man. That's what it is.
Okay, this is difficult for me to talk about. One of the backlash, I don't know how to find another word for it. People knew I was there because I was waiting to be court-martialed, because I was part of that group of lesbians. So one night, I was raped by 3 soldiers, telling me that it's because I never knew what having a big one was. To this day, I still don't know who these guys were because they blindfolded me.
Destroyed everything for me of the reality. Because when I went out of there, for me, it was the world and me. I was not part of it. I was just excluded of it. So I could not trust nobody. I was like, I felt so dirty. I felt like I let down the whole family. I was like, what am I gonna do with this? And it was they kicked me out 2 days after my birthday in December. And all the time, you know, just before Christmas. I remember arriving in Montreal and not knowing what to do, and you don't even want to come and live here. You don't want to go live nowhere. You don't want to see your family. You don't want to see your friend. You don't want to talk about it. You just want to forget. So the best is drugs, alcohol, drugs. Let's forget. Let's forget. I don't want to talk about it.
I actually, en français, on dit sevrer, clean my system of pills by myself in my apartment. I got there, I owed 2 months rent. I had all kind of bills, you know, hydro and stuff. And all I did is I sat there and I cried for about a week.
And I lived as a robot, I think, not feeling anything anymore. Not feeling anything anymore. Just feeling that was me then and I'm nobody now.
I was a good soldier. I gave it my all. And I would have given my life for it. Absolutely. 110%. And that's how we were trained. You don't give just 50% of yourself. We want it all. And they took it all. But then they spit me out.
I was an excellent soldier. I became homeless. I had no money. I couldn't come back to Ontario. And then I found out the only way that my family will accept me is if I marry my old girlfriend. So I married my girlfriend. And we had a family. That only lasted a little while. I was okay. But I'm gay. I'm not a straight man.
Because I felt ashamed for 38 years. Still feel ashamed about sort of betraying your country, like, because I was told I was a security risk. A threat to my country. And I sort of felt ashamed.
This stole my life. What I have been versus what I should have been. I should have been the first female chief warrant officer in the MP trade. That's what I was going for. I never got over it.
Thousands of people were investigated. The RCMP gave an annual report. The last one we've seen, they had 9,000 people under investigation.
It was a war against us. We should get retribution for that.
Now, the odd thing is, and I interviewed a lot of those Mounties, and I don't remember them ever coming across a case of a homosexual being successfully blackmailed. Even the Mounties themselves felt badly about it, and because it was such a travesty.
It's very clear that our government is committing to acknowledging and recognizing our legislation, programs, and policies that contributed to injustices and discriminations against LGBTQ Canadians, and that our government will apologize before the end of 2017.
I don't want an apology. I don't need an apology. I don't. The wound is too deep. The wound is too deep. It had sent my sisters and my brothers an arm to commit suicide. It sent them through deep into alcohol, into drugs. An apology. No, he may as well just go on his merry way.
I think we all deserve to have someone witness our pain. We all deserve to have a voice. We all deserve to have someone hear what we have to say.
We caused the damage as a country. We have a responsibility to make it right. I believe most Canadians are fair people, but they need to understand that it actually happened. That our country, not the United States, not the United Kingdom, not ISIS or some other horrible entity, the government of Canada and the RCMP and the Canadian Armed Forces pursued this policy of targeting gays and lesbians and investigating them and interrogating them and branding them as people with suffering from a character weakness and a threat to national security, and threw them out onto the street after they had volunteered to help our country. It was a disgraceful episode in our history.
All I want really is them to say, we did this, we apologize. They can use it was the philosophy back then, it was same thing in Civilian Street. They can use any excuse, I give them all to them. But just said, yes, we did it, we recognize it, and we apologize for it. And Maybe I'll stop crying.
It is with shame and sorrow and deep regret for the things we have done that I stand here today and say, we were wrong, we apologize, I am sorry, we are sorry.
Well, the human response is wow. This felt great. For me, it was long time waiting for it. It's been a very long journey, and I'm very happy that we are all here today. To get this apology is not going to change what happened, but it will change my perception of who did it and how it happened, and it will change my perception of life and of my country.
It's time for people to know what happened. I mean, a lot of people, like my family, that don't know that I've been through this. But that's okay. Other people have to know too. They need to know. It was not always nice. Canada did bad things to people, you know. They mistreated their soldiers, and people should know that. It's a part of history that should come out.
You know, we've all done things that in, what was I thinking? Why did I do that, you say? And when you get this together on a bigger stage with more people involved, things can get out of control. And I think that's what happened. And certainly that's what happened with the fruit machine. Nobody wants to take ownership of it now, you know. And the reactions I got, people just, they'd rather not have that part of it. You know, it's the dark corner of their history kind of thing, you know. And how did I ever get involved in that? But it's easy to fall into that kind of thing, you know. And I think it's a lesson that we have to be vigilant.
And for sure, like anything, it's because we fight that things change. Because if we didn't talk about it, nobody would not even look at it.
The people that are gay now should be happy in the military. I'm happy for them. I would love to be them. Be happy, be who you are and be happy, and think that people in the past maybe didn't have it so easy.
59 years old and I go back. Well, now I'm too old, they don't want me.
I was there to defend my country. They knock at the door today and ask me if I would go and join, to go and combat somewhere. As crazy as it may sound, I'd go.
If after all of this, and I could go back to the army, would I? I would, absolutely. On a dime. No questions asked. With everything I know now, with my experience, yes. Yeah, I miss it. I still miss it. I will always miss it.
Well, if I had to do it over again, I would. No regrets. None. And somebody said to me, "You're getting old, though. Are you afraid of dying?" I said, "No, I'm not afraid of dying. I'm only sorry." Doubt. Yeah. Like so much has happened and so much is going to come. Yeah. The good times are coming.
So these were the initial questions that the government devised to try to help them determine who is gay.
They had a very weird way of looking at that, because I'm looking at that and it wouldn't determine that to me at all. I like adventure stories better than romantic stories, and that would say if someone was gay, like, no. They had weird stories. The thought of being in an automobile accident is very frightening to me. That would show that somebody's gay? Like, pardon me? I always tried to make the best school grades that I could. So if somebody said that there was an inkling they might be gay, I am inclined to take things hard. I don't know. But who thought of this? Might be someone that's hiding that they're gay. They don't want other people to know.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.